So I want to talk to you guys about a group that I've had a couple of run-ins over the years with. The first of which was when I was in college at Hope International University. I was with a group of Bible study that would go out on the campus twice a week, and we would go witnessing on the campus. We would have prayer meetings and then Bible studies also, and we'd have a book table that was set up for anybody who was interested in coming on by and getting information about the group and about Christianity and the gospel. And one day there was an entire group of people that came over to our table, and they kind of just paired up with us one-on-one and just started arguing with us. And that group was part of the International Church of Christ, which some might know as the Boston Church of Christ or the LA Church of Christ. I've encountered them also in Chicago. One time we got invited, my wife and I, to a worship service that she said, "Oh yeah, they go to the Church of Christ." And I said, "Well, I guess we're going to find out whether or not it's the good Church of Christ or the not so good Church of Christ." And we walked in the door. They asked us, "Who invited you?" And I knew right away it was the not so good Church of Christ. And it was interesting to be able to participate in a worship service. Interesting thing, going back to that encounter at the book table, there was one of those gentlemen who actually came back later in secret and wanted to make sure that nobody knew that he was talking to us. And he actually ended up giving his life over to Jesus, leaving that group. And then we watched as this man started getting harassed by other members of the group. They were just really ragging on him. Another interesting encounter, I actually got to meet one of the key leaders in that area of the group, and he had a interesting name. I think it was like Geo or something like that. And I was talking with him for quite a while, and then all of a sudden there was these two girls who seemed to come out of nowhere, and they started coming in and joining in the conversation. And it became clear after a while that these two girls were actually hitting on us. And I came to find out later that that was a strategy that they don't have a problem employing in terms of trying to recruit people. They are very popular when it comes down to the college age level. They're very active on college campuses. And I'm talking about the International Church of Christ. And I just want to talk to you about some of the doctrines and the history of this group so that you can become familiar with them and just recognize them when you run into them. Like I said, they're also known as the Boston Church of Christ, the Crossroads Movement, Multiplying Ministries, the Discipling Movement, the International Church of Christ, the London Church of Christ, the San Diego Church of Christ, etc. So as far as doctrines go, they believe in the Bible as the inerrant, infallible Word of God. They're Trinitarian. They believe in the resurrection of Jesus and the sacrificial atonement. The Boston Church of Christ is the only true church, and that is a dangerous belief. They believe in baptismal regeneration, meaning baptism is necessary for salvation, and baptism in their church with a proper understanding that baptism saves is required for salvation. Heavy discipleship. And what I mean by heavy discipleship is the type of every person in the church is supposed to have somebody discipling them, and somebody they're discipling who's lower than them or newer to the group than them. And discipleship isn't necessarily just let's teach you the basics, let's open up the Bible and study it together. It's who should I marry? What kind of job should I have? What should I do with my life? Where should I live? All of those types of questions and more would be under the scrutiny of the person who is your discipler, and they would have the authority in your life to be able to tell you the answer to all of those questions. It's unquestioned submission to authority is another trademark of this group. So a little bit about its history. Its distant origins go back to 1967 in Gainesville, Florida, under Charles Lucas. And Lucas started a program called the Multiplying Ministries Program, which was very successful. And the movement we're concerned with here originated in the Crossroads Church of Christ in Florida in 1985, where a guy named Kip McKeon, who had been trained in the discipling methodology by Mr. Lucas from Charleston, Illinois, early in the movement. Kip later moved to Massachusetts, and using the methods he learned under Lucas, the church there began to grow. And in the first year, 103 people were baptized into their church. In the second year, 200 were baptized. The third year, 256. Fourth year, 368. So on, till we got 6,790 people. And so from its modest beginnings, the church has grown into 103 congregations all over the world with total Sunday attendance of 50,000 members. And in 1982, the Boston movement began planning their pillar churches. These are the churches in key cities throughout the world. The first two were established in Chicago and London. And then in 1986, a program called Reconstruction was undertaken, and this is the process whereby ministers in established Church of Christ churches are replaced with Boston Church of Christ trained ministers. And this caused problems among the organization, but it helped to solidify this group. So the structure, Kip McKeon is the director and unquestioned leader, and under Kip are the elders. Under the elders are the evangelists, then zone leaders, then house church leaders, which is obsolete in most congregations, then assistant Bible talk leaders. McKeon says that these leaders govern by consensus, but as I'm the one who gives them direction. So, in regards to authority and submission, Al Bard, one of the uppermost leaders in the International Church of Christ, said, "Let us begin our discussion of submission by talking about what it is not. Submission is not agreeing. When one agrees with the decision that he is called to submit to, he does not really have to submit in any way. By definition, submission is doing something one has been asked to do that he would not do if he had his own way. Submission is not just outward obedience, it includes that, but also involves obedience from the heart. It's a wholehearted giving up one's own desires. Submission is not conditional. We submit to authority not because the one in authority deserves it, but because the authority comes from God. Therefore, we are in reality submitting to God." So where did this group come from? You might have noticed that it was called the Church of Christ. And you might remember from our discussions with talking about the LDS Church, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that there was a movement in the early 1800s in America called the Restoration Movement. And it was started by Thomas and Alexander Campbell, along with some contemporaries. And it was an idea that the true Church of Jesus Christ needed to be restored to the earth, that somewhere along the line, and they disagreed exactly on when, but somewhere along the line, the church had gone completely apostate, and there was a need to return to New Testament Christianity, the early church, and the model that you see in the book of Acts. And so going back to the book of Acts, they started incorporating in baptismal regeneration. And this is true of any Christian church, Church of Christ, Disciples of Christ. All of those movements came off of this. And with the Church of Christ, there's the instrumental Church of Christ and the non-instrumental Church of Christ. And I should add that the International Church of Christ is also non-instrumental in terms of they don't use any kind of instrumentation in their worship services. Why? Because they say that it cannot be found in the New Testament. And so anything that was not in the New Testament, the idea was that they were not going to do it. And anything they did find in the New Testament, they were going to do it. And so baptismal regeneration, in other words, you have to be baptized to be saved. And most of these churches of Christ, will require people to be rebaptized in their church, even if they have been previously baptized And by baptized, I mean immersed as a believer after they have believed. Okay, so those are some distinctives of this group. And so you have this heavy discipleship, you have this belief, this distinction between Christian and disciple. And I remember them asking all the time. They would get people in by asking, are you a Christian or are you a disciple? And a disciple was one who would truly submit and they're wholehearted devoted to the church. And of course, they're the one true church that can give you the truth, truly disciple you, and truly help you come into a relationship with Jesus Christ. So that's the International Church of Christ. You may have run into them, and I just wanted to cover that one briefly.